Hello, and welcome to the second part of the Upstander video series, Creating a Culture of Consent, Part 2, Case Scenarios. In the first video, we learned how to live the Upstander life by using the life model to intervene across the entire spectrum of violence, from daily acts of harm to high-risk situations. If you have not watched the first video or attended an Upstander life training before, please pause this video and return after you have had the chance to do so. In the second video, we will now apply what we learned about the Upstander life model to a specific scenario. We encourage you to go through each scenario video that interests you and practice upstanding in a variety of situations. Before we go through today's scenario, we want to preface that the purpose of the following case scenario is to foster awareness about being an upstander for all of the Stanford community members. In the case scenario, we're explicit in naming the identities of the individuals because we aim to analyze how issues of power, privilege, and oppression operate as relates to intervention. We want to be clear that we are not naming these identities to further perpetuate harmful stereotypes. By making these identities more explicit, our goal is to start a conversation around issues of power and present situations in a more realistic manner. We also want to note that no individual scenario can take into account the full complexity of social stratification that reflects the realities of each individual and situation. We recognize that these scenarios are limited because they may or may not include certain identities and may or may not include specific experiences. However, we hope that by taking all these upstander scenarios together, these series of videos can contribute to a certain extent to a more comprehensive understanding of how systems of oppression can influence upstanding. So my name is Alexandra Torres Arsuaga. I am a SHARE student staff member for the SHARE education team, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Pungafari. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director, Education and Outreach Manager for the SHARE education team. And as part of the SHARE education team, I'm going to share a little bit more about who we are and what we stand for. So SHARE stands for Sexual Harassment, Assault, Response, and Education. And at SHARE Ed, our vision is that we believe in communities where everyone is empowered to express themselves and have caring relationships. We work towards our vision through our everyday mission to empower the Stanford community to end sexual and relationship violence, stalking, gender discrimination, and sexual harassment through collaborative healing, education, activism, response, and transformation. To learn more, you can visit share.stanford.edu. Before we get started, we wanted to also acknowledge that these scenarios discuss issues of racism, homophobia, sexism, gender discrimination, and sexual harassment and assault, which can cause discomfort and distress to many. And we want to provide resources that you can use during and after this workshop. For support, you can visit sexualviolencesupport.stanford.edu, relationship violence support.stanford.edu, transgender support.stanford.edu, or yourywca.stanford.edu. For general information on updates and policies, you can visit sexualrespect.stanford.edu and Stanford Admin Guide 1.7.1. If you're unsure to where to start, the confidential support team and ombudsperson are two confidential resources that are always a great place to begin. The confidential support team are licensed therapists who specializes in providing trauma-informed care to anyone impacted by sexual and relationship violence and gender discrimination, and the ombudsperson is general resource for any concerns that you may wish to discuss.
Now let's do a quick recap of the Upstander life model in more detail. Specifically, to live the Upstander life, we must recognize that violence is a spectrum of daily acts of harm and high-risk situations, and that all violence is interconnected. To help us do so, we created the life model that recognizes the unique barriers that each person faces when it comes to upstanding. To clarify, the objective of the life model is to motivate upstanding, as opposed to being rigid checkboxes to follow that may act as a barrier to intervening. The priority of being an upstander should be intervening whenever possible, not necessarily hitting every point of the model. However, by practicing how to use the life model, we hope that the life process helps you to be more comfortable to effectively intervene whenever you need to. Now let's discuss the first step of life, which is to take lead and notice the situation. In order for us to notice situations that warrant intervention, we need to notice behaviors that conflict with our personal values and communal norms that cultivate a community of care. At Stanford, these explicit values are established through policies and statements like the Title IX prohibited sexual conduct. You may also have personal values such as integrity, trust, and safety, or you may have community norms established in your dorm, student group, or organization like respect, equity, and love. So when situations occur that do not align with these values and norms, we can take notice and be more inclined to take the lead. Take a moment to reflect on some personal and communal values that come to mind. The second step of intervention in the life model is to take your identities into account when interpreting the situation as problematic. According to research, people interpret situations through their worldviews. Worldviews are like a pair of lenses that we each have, and each lens is unique to our identities, beliefs, and experiences. Take a moment to reflect on the unique lens that you use to perceive the world around you. How do your lenses influence whether or not you perceive a situation as problematic?
The third step is to tap into your feelings to assume personal responsibility. So sometimes, even when we interpret a situation as problematic, so that's step 2 of life model, we may not assume personal responsibility. And that's because that's why it's so helpful that we have this deep seated intuition that typically shows up in our emotional responses. These emotional responses illuminate whether our needs are satisfied or not satisfied. So, my question to you is, can you recall a situation where you felt angry, sad, frustrated, or hurt? What was the need underneath that emotion that was not satisfied? When we tune into our feelings to understand our needs, we can be more motivated to take action, which leads me to our last step. So, the last step is to evaluate the situation to know what to do and to intervene safely. So, based on the situation, your personal safety, here are 4 strategies called the 4 Ds that you can use to intervene. You can use all 4 or pick and choose what works best for you. So the first one is direct. So after assessing your personal safety, you can directly intervene by placing yourself into the situation. The second one is around distract. So creating a distraction to cause one or more of the people to disengage from the situation. Third is delegate, telling another person or resource who can help you intervene, perhaps. And then lastly, it's delay. After the incident, you can check in with the person who you are concerned about or do something that is after the fact to be able to intervene.
Now we're going to apply what we learned to one scenario. Before we get started, we want to give a warning that this scenario contains themes of consent and potential sexual misconduct. The characters in this scenario are Alicia, who is a freshman and who uses she, her pronouns, Jaden, who is also a freshman and who uses he, him pronouns, and both of these characters live in the same ethnic themed dorm. The scenario is, in your dorm, you hear a rumor that Alicia was raped by Jaden last weekend after a party. According to the rumor going around, Alicia and Jaden started dancing at a frat party on Friday night and they kissed once, but then they were separated. They both later went back to the dorm separately. Jaden then knocked on Alicia's door and she let him in. They started kissing, but then Alicia turned him away and said that he should go because she wants to go to sleep. He became a lot more forceful and persistent after she repeatedly turned him down and ended up sexually assaulting her. While you're not close friends with Alicia or Jaden, your dorm is really tight-knit, and a lot of the residents are also part of the same identity-based organizations outside of the dorm. The next day, you walk into a common space, and you overhear a group of residents in your dorm talking about the situation. They don't notice that you're in the room, and they seem to have taken sides, with the girls mostly defending Alicia and the guys mostly defending Jaden. You hear one of the guys say, if she didn't want to do anything, why did she even let him into her room? She probably just regretted the sex and is now crying rape. You've noticed that this division is also apparent outside of just your dorm. You're really uncomfortable with the conversation, but you don't know whether to get involved or not. At this point, please pause the video and take a few minutes to go through the life model. As a reminder, you first lead by noticing the situation, then you interpret your identities and lenses, then you pay attention to your feelings and needs to create a response, and finally, you evaluate using the 4 Ds, which are direct, distract, delegate, and delay.
We will now go through an example of how we use the life model in this scenario. However, I want to also preface that there's no correct way of using life model and that every example that we provide is very particular to each person. And so hopefully you had an opportunity to pause the video and just be able to go through this yourself. So first, we take lead by noticing the situation. And in order for us to notice the situation, I need to notice the behaviors that conflict with our Stanford communal norms of safety and consent, which is defined as freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. Remember that coercion and persistence do not equal consent. So, examples of how someone can be persistent is by saying things like, "Come on, it'll be fun," or "I really want to have sex with you. I feel like we are connected," or "I thought you loved me," after you reject their advances. I also noticed that the situation may go against the Title IX policy that prohibits sexual misconduct, which is defined as any sexual act directed against someone without their affirmative consent in possible dorm policies. Next, I should be mindful of the ways I'm interpreting the situation through the lenses of my worldview, of my identities. If the observer in the situation is another woman in the dorm who is friendly with Alicia, she may automatically view these behaviors as problematic and want to help Alicia. She may also have shared experiences with sexual misconduct and gossip, which may aid her in her recognizing the situation. However, if the observer is one of Jaden's friends in the dorm, they may assume that Jaden is not capable of causing harm. Furthermore, if they do not have a complete understanding of consent, they may also think that Alicia consented to everything because she kissed Jaden previously. Next, it's important to tune into your feelings and thereby needs to then assume personal responsibility. This is also an opportunity to acknowledge any barriers you may have. So, when reading this situation, I feel really concerned for Alicia. I am concerned about what may have occurred, but I'm also concerned for her personal information being spread throughout the dorm. These feelings connect to the need for privacy and also bodily autonomy for me. I am also concerned that because Alicia and Jaden are part of the same community or dorm on a dorm and identity level, it may be harder for her to avoid him if she feels unsafe. I also feel concerned for the entire dorm community and how this incident may have far-reaching impacts on everyone and the group as a whole. Because of this, I feel the need to address both the individual level and community level harms. However, if I'm a freshman, I may not be as familiar with Stanford resources. With that in mind,
I now want to evaluate how to intervene. Remember the 4 Ds of intervention, which are direct, distract, delegate, and delay, which gives us options to intervene while keeping safety and other barriers in mind. For the direct strategy, I can choose to walk over to them and let them know that they probably shouldn't be discussing a really personal matter. I can tell them to put themselves in Alicia's shoes and ask them if they would want someone talking about the intimate details of their lives, consensual or not. I can also remind them that just because someone consented to one thing, like a kiss, doesn't mean everything that follows is automatically consensual. For the delegate strategy, I decide to talk to one of my RAs about the situation and let them know what I heard happened and that the dorm community is gossiping and taking sides. I tell my RA I think this should be addressed in a dorm meeting to remind people about how to practice consent and not discuss other people's personal matters, especially in a public space. I also know that my RAs have to share information with the Shared Title IX office so that students impacted can get access to resources for reporting and support. I also know that because my RA is part of the same ethnic themed dorm, they may know resources that are specifically intended for our community. I also mentioned to my RA that I recently heard of something called a community conversation circle, facilitated by the Share office, that can help a community who has been impacted by something to process and perhaps restore as a whole. I tell them that this may be something for our community to try out.
in order to disrupt the conversation, you can maybe try spilling something in the kitchen or pretending that you lost your phone and asking the group for help. Doing this may bring an end to the conversation or at least buy you more time to think about what you can do next. Remember, this is an opportunity to be creative with your distraction. And then lastly, you can use this intervention strategy if you didn't have the chance to do anything in the moment. Remember, it's never too late to be an upstander. And for me, I decide to not talk to the group at the moment, but I decide to go check on Alicia. I inform her that that you heard something, that I heard something, and may have happened between her and Jaden. And I just want to make sure that everything's okay. I tell her that I am there for her if she wants to talk about anything and that I can help her seek help if she needs, or she does not want to talk, maybe. And I could just offer to just sit there and keep her company. I also want to make sure to emphasize that the ball is in her court and I can be there for her, whichever and however she decides.
Thank you for going through this scenario with us. If you have any questions or would like to provide any feedback on this video, you can see the contact information on this slide. And please continue to practice living the upstander life. If you want more opportunities to practice upstanding, you can check out our other upstander scenario videos on our website.